All right, before we open our Bibles, let's go ahead and just recap briefly where we're at. I think everybody was here last week except for Brooke. How was Arizona? Yeah, glad to be back. Gets back and... See, Ron, we take offense to that, don't we?
Yeah. It's because he's here.
What?
It's because he's here.
Oh. She gets that from her mother. Can I help you, Angela?
No, I'm like, no, she doesn't get that from her mother.
What are you implying?
I didn't say where she got it. I didn't know she didn't get it from Lisa.
You have them so snowed. All right. So again, we're comparing the different lists of the 12 tribes of Israel. I'm going to make the statement first. There always has to be 12 tribes. There's one place in Scripture where there's 13. Everywhere else there's 12 that I can find. There's one time with 4, but it serves a purpose. So remember, we covered through Genesis 29, 30, and 35. We covered the birth of the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. And then, remember, Dinah's mixed in there as a daughter. And she's mentioned because she's going to be important for a story later. But however, I do not believe that those are the only 13 children that they had. I mean, what's the chances of having 12 boys and one girl? Probably pretty slim, right? But anyways. Then remember, Benjamin is born in Genesis 35. As Rachel's dying, names him Benoni, son of my sorrow. Of course, Jacob's not having any of that, and renames him Benjamin. Genesis are listed by mother, then birth order after that. And then when they're heading to Egypt in Genesis 46, then is the first time the sons of Leah, they're by mother. And then it mentions that Joseph's children are already in Egypt, but 70 people total over about 200 years becomes, more than a couple million people. Genesis 48, the sons of Joseph are blessed, and Joseph gets a double portion of inheritance. So now, here's what I was teaching last week, and I hope you caught this. This was the crux of what we taught last week. I have always been trying to figure out, why would God ask for the firstborn of every tribe? And because that's the way it was, starting in Exodus, but then before Exodus, the firstborn shall be mine, and then it switches to the tribe of Levi. And so when we get to Numbers and it switches, we find that the number of Levites is only about 400 off from the number of firstborn in Israel. And so it's interesting. But I think, my opinion is, that the reason that God took the Levites and made them the priests instead of the firstborn is because then what you're doing by taking out the Levites, you are giving Joseph a double portion, as almost elevating him to firstborn, even though he was 11th. Firstborn of the favorite wife, so maybe that was it. And so now Joseph has a double portion, Ephraim and Manasseh. And so then now the Levites are just scattered amongst everybody. Now, when we get to here in a minute, remember, we'll go ahead and just talk about that now. So Genesis 48, the sons of Joseph are blessed. Joseph gets a double portion. God honors Jacob's giving Joseph a double portion, changing the number of tribes from 12 to 13 in doing so. But then that is what eliminates pulling out the Levites, and then just now we have 2 different tribes from one guy, Joseph. I just think that's cool. Then Jacob's blessing then, remember, talks about Dan being a serpent of the way. We're going to cover that in a bit. But also, he says he's going to scatter. No, I'm getting ahead of myself. Am I? All right, and so in Genesis 49, he says that Simeon and Levi will be scattered because of their anger and what they did at Shechem, because Shechem defiled their sister Dinah. So, but what turns out is in the scattering of Simeon was by putting them in the tribe of Judah, and they're basically not mentioned again until, as far as their own tribe, they're just now part of the southern kingdom. But they're scattered inside of it. The Levites are scattered and don't get an inheritance, but they get the Lord's inheritance. So for one tribe, it's more of a blessing than the other. One, it's more of a curse. One of it's more of a blessing. And it's interesting how that ends up being fulfilled. We don't think the Levites are scattered, but they were. They don't get an inheritance. There's not a spot on the map for Levi. And can you pull up that map real quick? I think, just to point it out, the map of Israel should be further down here. Yeah, there we go. See, Simeon is inside of Judah, and we pointed that out last week, and that's in Joshua. All right, go back to black screen, if you would, please. And then in Exodus, the 12 sons are sorted by mother, then age, and they're all mentioned there. And then, but it's only mentioning 3 sons, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. Remember to establish that Moses and Aaron are indeed Levites. It's connecting them. That first graph we saw up here with the long lines, that's how we can go to the Bible and make a genealogy and look back and know when creation happened, by going by those people's names and backwards. But going forward, all we needed was the age of Moses at the giving of the law, 80, and then add 430 years, and that's, Moses giving the law, what did I say wrong? And so from that point, then we can go by kings, we can go all by a bunch of different ways to get a good chronology of the Old Testament. And it also solidifies the fact that only 4 generations were in fact, in Egypt, and they weren't there for 430 years. The first Numbers census is the first list omitting the Levites, since they were the priests, and that's the first one that also has Joseph listed as 2 tribes. And then the Levites get their own census at the end. The arrangement of the camp. Let's go ahead and go with the first arrangement of the camp one, the white one. So you see there Manasseh and Ephraim over on the left-hand side. Both of those would be Joseph. And then you see the rest of them, because the Levites would just be in the middle. And Simeon, at this point, sleeping in the wilderness, wandering in the wilderness, would not have their inheritance, nor would they be part of Judah yet. That is coming, though, later, and that's why this doesn't reflect that. All right, then there's a second census at K-Barnea. No, it's not. The second census taken next to the Jordan River. My notes are wrong, sorry, that I put here. Verse 28 mentions Joseph, but splits in the same verse, splits in Manasseh and Ephraim, so it still is only 12, and no Levi is mentioned. Now when they're going to enter the promised land, I talked about this. In Deuteronomy 27, the 6 sons of Rachel and Leah are up on one mountain yelling blessings, and then the sons of the nurses are on the other mountain, plus Reuben, plus the youngest, which I think is Zebulun? Or is it Zebulun, are on the other side. So 6 and 6 yelling cursings, yelling blessings. No, blessings and cursings as they go into the promised land. That's in Deuteronomy 27. We also read that in the last couple weeks. All right, the Moses blessing for Deuteronomy 23 does not include Simeon, but it does include Joseph's 2 sons, but not till verse 17. It's kind of a long thing there. So, okay, let's go to Genesis 49. So Joshua 19 covers in both verse 1 and verse 9 that all of Simeon is within the borders of Judah. Do y'all remember that? I showed you the map up here. Some maps have Simeon a separate tribe and down below. And I mean, that's not what it says. And most of the maps I see say otherwise. All right, are you in Genesis 49? Okay. Now, we should be going now this way in the Bible the whole time. And towards the end, I think. Genesis 49, look at verses 5 and 7. This is the curse that I was talking about. Simeon and Levi. So again, these are the two. Our brethren, instruments of cruelty are their habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly, mine honor. Be not thou united. For in anger they slew a man, they slew a bunch of men, and in their self-will they digged down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. Now watch this. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And I've never caught that until this study, that the Levites, although they are the priests, are actually cursed. And so the scattering within the country, within the tribes, is a curse. And it's confirmed in Joshua chapter 14. It says, therefore they gave no part of the Levites in the land save the cities to dwell in. So, all right. Let's go now to 1 Chronicles chapter 2. I tell you, when we get to if those of you that are following along the videos, first off, thank you very much. And glad that this week was a little extra educational for you. But when we get to Chronicles, there's going to be 3 days where I don't know if I should just make us all power through it. 9 chapters of nothing but just begats, and it's Chronicles. And so just be ready for that. We'll figure it out. But, all right. So 1 Chronicles genealogy here. By the way, chapters 1 through 9 are genealogy. And it says here, 1 Chronicles 2, 1 and 2, these are the sons of Israel, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, and Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And so you see them mentioned there. Why did I not count these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, good. Why didn't I make notes next to this? Judah's there, Levi's there. And Joseph's there. All right, verse 2. I had to look at that for a second. All right, now let's go to Ezekiel 48, and the only time in Scripture where it has 13 tribes. And in the same chapter, it also has 12. This is cool stuff. Ezekiel 48. Are you sitting there thinking you have a different idea of what cool is than I do? Fine. Okay, so I'm not going to read the entire verses because they say basically the same thing, but we'll just cover the first in order to cover it. Okay, verse 1, you see there a portion of Dan. Verse 2, and by the border of Dan, Dan is the fifthborn, and by the border of Asher, 8, and by the border of Naphtali, 6, by the border of Manasseh would be 11, by the border of Ephraim, 11. We're down at verse 6 there. So Manasseh and Ephraim would both be 11. And by the border of Reuben, firstborn, by the border of Judah, fourthborn. Verse 22, moreover, for the possession of the Levites, so now they're mentioned. I forgot to tell you what we're reading here. We're talking right now about the millennium. And so now the millennium, both Simeon and Levi get their own inheritance. Simeon's is not inside of Judah, and Levi's inheritance is not scattered. So they're all brought back together in Ezekiel 48. Sorry, I should have told you that first. So now we're at 13, only one time in all scriptures during the millennium. All right. And for the possession of the city, being in the midst of that, which is the princes between the border of Judah and the border of Benjamin, shall be for the prince. As for the rest of the tribes, from the east side to the west side, Benjamin shall have a portion. All right. And by the border of Benjamin, 12th born, and by the border of Simeon, 2nd born, and by the border of Issachar, 9th born, and by the border of Zebulun, 10th, and by the border of Gad, 7th. This is the land which ye shall divide by lot unto the tribes of Israel for inheritance, and these are their portions, saith the Lord God. Again, we're talking about the millennium, and it's the only place we have 13 listed. Everywhere else is 12, and it has to be 12. I'll get to why in a moment. All right. So now look so that was the millennium. Now in Ezekiel 48, we have 12 gates, and these 12 gates are named after the 12 sons. So these then will eliminate Do you know off the top of your head who it's going to eliminate if it only talks about the sons? You do? Well, okay, I didn't ask that right. Yes, you're right. It eliminates Ephraim and Manasseh, right? Were you about to say that, Clay? All right. So now in this very same chapter, lists 12 or lists 13, lists them all, but Joseph is 2. And so now, the double portion granted by Jacob to Joseph is still valid during the millennium. However, look down here at verse 31. The 12 gates, and this is talking, well, we'll get to it in a moment. And the gates of the city, and we're going to be talking about new heaven here. And the gates of the city shall be after the names of the tribes of Israel. 3 gates northward, 1 gate of Reuben, 1 gate of Judah, and 1 gate of Levi. So that's 1, 4, and 3. And at the east side, 4,500 and 3 gates. That's a measurement, sorry. And 1 gate Joseph, that's 11th. 1 gate Benjamin, 12th. 1 gate Dan, 5th. And at the south side, 4,500 measures and 3 gates. 1 gate of Simeon, 2nd born. 1 gate of Issachar, 9th born. 1 gate of Zebulun, 10th. And at the west side, 4,500. And again, you see it's all square. With their 3 gates, 1 gate of Gad, 1 gate of Asher. Gad was 7th, Asher 8th. 1 gate of Naphtali. Do me a favor, pull up that white one with the camp arrangement again. And let's see, verse 35. It was round about 13,000 measures, and the name of and the name of the city from that day shall be, the Lord is there. Okay, just double checking this. I didn't think to look at this. Reuben, Judah, Levi. Well, no, it wouldn't be the same because, yes, okay. So then Joseph, Benjamin, Dan, can't have that either. Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun? Nope. Okay. Just double checking if there might have been a correlation there. Okay. Thank you. You can take that back off and go to black screen, please. All right. So Old Testament, that covers all of the lists of the 12 tribes. Okay? So now, think with me for a moment, if you will. Well, it's not something hard to think about. I should have had a slide for this. During the tribulation, there will be 144,000 Jews who are evangelists, or whatever we want to call them. Can we call them evangelists? Okay. So, during the tribulation, remember the tribulation is a testing time and a proving time for Israel. Let's go to Revelation chapter 7. I'm sorry, you are going to have to go backwards once here, but it'll be worth it. Revelation chapter 7, again, lists 13 tribes. Does anybody know off the top of your head which 2 are missing? Yeah, Dan is one. The other one's Ephraim, but you'll see that here in a moment. All right, so remember, this is during the tribulation. Revelation chapter 7, look at verses 4 through 8. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 140 and 4,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. 12 times 12, well, 12 times 12,000 is 144,000. Verse 5, of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000. So you see them all there. And what you see missing, you may want to write it in your border, or in your margins. Dan and Ephraim are not here. Now the question becomes why, and I found it. Listen to me. I found it. It's been in Scripture the whole time, and it took me 30 years to find it. I don't know if that's something I should brag about. All right, so keep something here. We are going to go back to Revelation. Go back to Jeremiah chapter 4.
So who is Joseph and Manasseh then in place of Dan and Ephraim?
Manasseh is mentioned, but Dan and Ephraim are not. So the 144,000 will be every tribe except for Dan and Ephraim. Levi's in.
Joseph is mentioned though.
Yeah.
Joseph is in, as is Levi.
Yes.
Jeremiah what?
4. Where am I at? Okay. How much do you trust your pastor when you're sitting there in Bible study and you can't remember which comes first, Jeremiah or Ezekiel? Well, just remember Jeremiah is a major prophet, Ezekiel is too, but he's later. Does that help? I can get you back from Tioga Falls.
As soon as I get Ecclesiastes, I just get to Matthew. Hope I get something in the middle.
Are you ready? All right. Jeremiah chapter 4, look at verse 14 and 15. And so what it's tied to here is pagan worship in the northern kingdom, and it was centered in Dan and Ephraim, come to find out. Verse 14 here, O Jerusalem, wash thine heart from wickedness, that thou mayest be saved. How long shall thy vain thoughts lodge within thee? For the voice declareth from Dan, and publisheth affection from Mount Ephraim. So it mentions both. Mount Ephraim would be an Ephraim. So Dan and Ephraim would both be mentioned here. It's the only two places that they have something in common. And again, that's assuming that Mount Ephraim is in the tribe of Ephraim. Yes?
I don't know where it's at, but I did have notes in somewhere in there where one of the first places that they worshiped, where they did go to Jerusalem, was Mount Ephraim, and it talked about, and it was back in.
And it was after the split, right?
Yeah, it was right after the split.
Yep. Okay, so for me, that answers the question as to why. Even though it doesn't say the tribe of Ephraim, it's from the Mount Ephraim, and so that would be an Ephraim. So there we go. All right, let's go back to Revelation 14. So again, if it's in the Bible and there's a connection, that is the only connection I see between the two tribes in two different places. If there's another one, I'll reteach the lesson here in a couple years and we'll figure it out, but I doubt I'm ever going to study this again other than to refresh my memory. Or if somebody tells me I'm wrong and I have to go study it again to figure out if I'm wrong or not. So now, just we need to clarify here, there are people on earth, well, not anymore, that claim to be of the 144,000. The last group to do so were the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is a great claim to have when you have less than 144,000 people in your membership. We are the 144,000. Well, now you have 3 million. Now who are you? But it's kind of interesting. You look here at Revelation chapter 14. Look at verses 1 through 5. It says here, and I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. So when you wonder where Satan gets the idea, or the first beast, of putting a mark in somebody's forehead, this is where it comes from. And I heard the voice, so this 144,000 is the same 144,000 from chapter 7. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, as the voice of a great thunder, and I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. I love getting to that verse because then we get to talk about harper over here. And they sung, as it were, a new song before the throne, and before the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. And remember, so they're all 144,000 down to the man is going to be killed during the tribulation. That takes some coordination. Verse 4. These are they, okay, so this tells you who the 144,000 are. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. So back in the day, when you had that woman show up to your house and tell you that she was one of the 144,000, we already start off with a big problem. She's a woman. Do you have kids? Oh, well, yeah, you're not one of the 144,000. For they're virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men. There you go, men. Being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth is found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. These 144,000 without fail are male Jewish virgins. How many of those people knock on your door? Any of you are Jewish at all?
I have a friend who's Jewish.
Do you? Why don't you ask him? Her. Russian Jewish. I'm generally just slow Jewish. Thank you. All right, you ready? So now let's talk about the wall of New Jerusalem again. Let's go to Revelation chapter 21. And this, along with Ezekiel 48, is why there has to be 12. God had 12 tribes. Joseph threw a little bit of a wrench in it, Jacob threw a wrench in it by splitting Joseph. God honors it up until heaven. Even during the millennium, it's honored, but in heaven it is not. Yes.
Does this have anything to do with why Jesus had 12 disciples?
Will you let me finish the lesson?
Spoiler.
Spoil alert. Do you want us to just come up and teach a lesson?
It's okay, Becca.
No, it was a question. I don't know the answer. That's why
You
I'm
will in a
asking.
moment. All right. Are you ready, Becca?
Yes.
Okay. Revelation 21, look at verse 10. This is the wall of New Jerusalem. This is talking about the New Jerusalem. This is talking about heaven, which is also what Ezekiel 48, the second half of the chapter, is talking about. Not the first half. First half's talking about the millennium. Second half talking about heaven. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. And her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates. And at the gates 12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. Now watch the names. No, it doesn't tell them. But on the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations. In them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And so there you go, Becca. So, look here in verse 13. It doesn't give the names, but it says the sons. Where was that again? All right. Which are the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. So we come back here, we learned in Ezekiel 48, we're talking about the 12 sons. So the gate will have Joseph, it will have Levi, and will not have Ephraim, and will not have Manasseh. That's why there always has to be 12. God would have to rearrange and make, how do you divide out 13? Then you have to make it a circle like our first, was it Betsy Ross, whoever made the first flag, and it was a circle with 13 stars. Then all of heaven would have to be changed into a sphere. Then how do you make a sphere with 13? So, it's kind of like if we admit another, the whole reason we don't admit another state as a country, what's our flag going to look like? How do you have 51 stars? Do you put one in the middle and then have all these stars around it and the same thing? It becomes a bothersome thing to figure out. And so we're going to leave Puerto Rico out. We're going to leave all those other people out. We're going to leave Washington, D.C. out until we can figure out 60, because that then divides kind of more evenly. And so that's why. So that's why it always has to be 12. The foundations. And then we find the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So, who are the 12 tribes? I believe it's talking about the 12 sons. Then, who are the apostles is the next question we have to ask. Because then, all of a sudden, if God honors Jacob's blessing to Joseph, does that mean that Jesus would also have to have 13 disciples? And imagine having 13 disciples, and then you have this modern thing where everybody's scared of the number 13. Would we also suddenly be scared of 14? Whatever. So the whole thing gets crazy. So, who is the 12th? Think about it. Is it Paul? If it's Paul, we have 23 Jewish men and 1 Gentile. He was the apostle to the Gentiles. I think it was Matthias. Why would you have everybody be Jewish, the whole thing be Jewish? And by the way, when I say that, that I'm not. We ought to have deference to Israel as a country because it's still God's chosen people, but it doesn't mean that we believe everything that Israel as a country does right. Right? It doesn't mean that everybody's good people and it's all, unicorns and rainbows. They can still do wrong, but, they're still God's chosen people. So we just got to be careful with that. So, if you don't go there. Well, you can if you want. Acts chapter 1, verse 26, they cast lots to find the new, matter of fact, I have it right here. I'll just read it to you. Acts chapter 1, verse 26, and they gave forth their lots, and the lot fell upon Matthias, and he was numbered with the 11 apostles. Now, he's never mentioned again, but did Matthias just buy his ticket to have, hey, I'm never going to be mentioned, but you know what? You're going to see my name for eternity on that wall right there. Or is it Paul? Who do you think it is? Serious question. The end of that part of the lesson is it. Do you think it's Paul? Do you think it's... Paul's one of the few Gentile writers of the Bible. Luke was a Gentile. Paul was a Gentile. Everyone else was Jewish, except for Nebuchadnezzar and his portion in Daniel.
But what was the criteria to be an apostle?
Ooh, very good question. You had to, according to Acts chapter 1, be present at the baptism of Jesus, serve during his whole earthly ministry, and be a witness to the resurrected, not the resurrection, but the resurrected Christ.
So was Paul in his baptism?
Well, Paul's a special case. Remember, it says he has one born out of due time.
So he would be an exception?
Yes. Because he wasn't there for the earthly... but I don't know if that's criteria here, because it could be. I don't know. Because God did make an exception for Paul to be an apostle. But of course, Paul had a special revelation given to him on the road to Damascus, right? Emmaus? Damascus. Yeah, Damascus, right? To answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think I was rattling there for a moment. I don't know. Chris, what do you think?
Probably Matthias, just because it says that, but part of me thinks Paul.
Yeah.
Just
A
because
tribute to Plan A in the church.
kind
Church is the bride of Christ. The city does come adorned as a bride adorned for her husband. Could be.
of kind of like the whole, you had 13 tribes and back down to 12. Paul bringing him in 13, drop Matthias.
Y'all want to make bets? We'll remember the bet when we get to heaven. What do you think? We're just going to forget all this?
Say, well, do we care?
We will at some point. I mean, about like 3 million years into this, we'll be like, what's all? Hey, y'all remember that bet we made?
Because we're a good Christian, we would make that.
Yeah.
What does the winner get?
Well, see, what you do is you bet gold.
But it doesn't matter.
Right. And then when you get to heaven, we pave the roads with that. And you're like, well, whatever. Give me a chunk of it. I have to pay off a debt. I don't know. All right. Let's see. So a couple other questions for you and we'll get out. So let's go backwards to Hebrews chapter 11. Because here endeth the lesson, but now we're going to talk a little bit about these people. Again, I'm looking for things in the wrong place. All right. So this city that's coming down out of heaven is talked about in Hebrews chapter 11, which we just read. This is going to be 9 verses. Yes. So let's go ahead and read them quickly. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. By faith Abraham, when he was called out of the place which he should after receive for inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. So see there, that is why he was always in a tent. And he looked for a city, because there were houses at the time. And he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Verse 10 right there is talking about the New Jerusalem. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged them faithful who was promised. Him faithful. Therefore sprang there even one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. And again, sand seed, star seed. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on earth. They didn't have Revelation chapter 21. They only had Ezekiel 48. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they've been mindful of that country from which they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is a heavenly, wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Now, look down at verse 35, Hebrews 11:35. When we received their dead raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection, being mindful of that city to come. So now we're going to go forward again. Let's go to Revelation chapter 4. Any questions on that? It's just talking about the city, that they were looking forward to. So, you looking forward to heaven is not a bad thing. Somebody getting saved because you tell them about heaven is not a bad thing. Well, they should only just love Jesus in order to get saved. Yeah, well, yeah, there's that. But, hope for heaven is part of it. It's not a bad thing. I remember I'm not going to tell that story. All right, so now let's look at the elders around the throne. And the question becomes, who are they? Revelation chapter 4, look at verses 4 and 10. And around about the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. And the 24 elders fall down before him that sat on the throne, and worship him that liveth forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, we're not going to read any further. You can see what they read, or what they said. Who are the 24 elders then? I think so. And I think it's also Joseph, no Manasseh, no Ephraim. I think it's the same as the foundations of the city. I think if you look on the edge of the foundations of the city and you see the name Matthias, then Matthias will be one of these. If it's Paul, you'll see Paul. I think they're going to match. So, with that in mind, who speaks in Revelation chapter 5? Look at Revelation chapter 5, verse 5. And one of the elders said unto me, Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. Who do you think said that to John? Nobody? Wouldn't it be Judah? Why would anybody else besides Judah say that? Lion of the tribe of Judah? No? You don't think so?
I was in that, or else my guess would be a Levite, because they're like the priest people in charge.
Could be. Did you also think about this? If the 24 elders are the 12 apostles and the 12 tribes of Israel, the head of the tribes, then John saw himself on a throne and didn't recognize himself. Which is interesting because when people came to earth from heaven, they were recognized. Samuel, Elijah, Moses at the Transfiguration, right? Samuel at the Witch of Endor, Star Wars reference. I don't know. So, and if that be the case, and that's Judah, and if you agree, you may not, you may think it's Levi, all of it's just a good guess. Then who speaks in Revelation chapter 7? Let's look at Revelation 7 and verse 13. 13 through 17. All right, where do we start out? 7:13. Okay. So this is referring to the 12 tribes of Israel, the 144,000, verse 13. One of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in fine robe, What are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they? And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. So the elder knows, but still asks John. And John doesn't know, but yet, instead of saying, I don't know, you know. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, so the second half of the tribulation, and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. These will all be martyred evangelists, male Jewish virgins. Those same 144,000 will be killed, martyred during the tribulation, the second half. And they will go to heaven, and they will be with Jesus the entire time after that. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple, and he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. They shall hunger no more, they shall thirst no more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them into living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Their eyes. Not everybody else yet. That doesn't happen until the end. Interesting. Any questions?